Why do I feel like every time I get on to record, it's like I'm using like a computer for the first time?
I also feel that way. Cool.
Wait, did you send it to me?
I just realized I told you I was going to do that later. Good.
And three, two, one. Welcome back to Punchline, the marketing podcast where we say the quiet part out loud about this industry that we all love to hate. I'm Beth Cormack.
And I'm Drew Stennett. And if you have applied to over 200 jobs only to hear back from like maybe four of them, or you've had an interview where they've asked you to present a literally entire marketing strategy for free, or maybe you've been ghosted during a final round, then buckle up, Buttercup. Today we are diving into the absolute circus that's trying to find a marketing job in 2025.
From the ATS systems that have seemed to be designed by people who literally hate humans to also interview processes that would make the Hunger Games look reasonable.
We're talking about everything nobody wants to admit, like why entry-level jobs suddenly require over 5 years of experience, this growing trend of unpaid test projects that Beth knows all about, and how LinkedIn has become both your best friend and worst enemy during your job hunt.
So, amidst all this complaining, we are going to be sharing some actual strategies for getting noticed, red flags to watch out for, and why sometimes the best thing that can happen is not getting that job that you thought that you really wanted.
Amen. So grab whatever keeps you sane during yet another day of refreshing your email for responses that aren't coming, because we're about to get real about marketing's recruitment reality check.
This is Punchline, real talk for the real ones in marketing who are just trying to pay their bills. So, first of all, I want to give a major thank you to everybody who listened to the solo episode last week that I did about my story with unemployment the last 6 months. That was a really hard episode for me to record. Unemployment has not been easy to deal with, but like I said in the episode, community is everything in this process, and I really felt such a strong sense of community after posting that. Like the amount of messages that I got and text message from people just like really just really hit my heart in the right ways. And so thank you for everybody who listened, for everybody who commented and reached out. Like I really appreciate that. So this episode is kind of going to be like a continuation of that, I guess, like under the same umbrella. Hopefully I won't be crying as much, but or at all. That's the goal for this episode. But yeah, I think it's going to be more of like a continuation of like, okay, unemployment sucks, job hunting sucks, the job market is really fucking hard right now, but what are some tips and strategies that Drew and I have learned along the way that help you land your next opportunity? Maybe not a full-time job, but at least like even like freelance clients or contract work. I think we both have a wealth of experience with that. So yeah, let's
Yeah.
dive into it.
No, Beth, thank you so much. Not only, I mean, when I asked you about doing a solo episode while I'm on this break, I knew I was going to crush, but I did not expect you to also make me cry multiple times. I think you did such an amazing job. Not that I ever doubted that you would, but if you haven't listened to last week's episode, don't even like forget our playtime. Go back and listen to it now. It's just such a wonderful 30 minutes that Beth just knocked it out of the park with. And not that I wanted it to last longer from like, I hate that you even like had to record that to begin with, but it wasn't long enough for me. Like I could listen to you talk all day. You just did an amazing job. And yeah, super excited to like kind of continue that conversation this week and just talk about what the fuck is it like to try to navigate the marketing economy right now, because it has not been fun or easy. I also want to apologize to our listeners. I'm in a new recording location today. I have an 8-month-old kitten who has just decided this is the witching hour, so we might have some extra background noise today.
We forgive you, Lucy.
Yeah. Lucy is, unfortunately, she operates on the spectrum of like, she can be as evil as she is cute, and she is the cutest thing in the world. So, really fun pet parenting experiences over here. She's also literally hanging over my head right now. This is risky business, but
So yeah, I think as we've mentioned in previous episodes, Drew and I have both been laid off multiple times. We've both been in the job hunt several times. We've both done like major career pivots. We've kind of done it all, and which is crazy because we're both so young. Like, what the actual fuck? I didn't like. Why have we been forced to do this so many times? But despite all of that, we have learned a lot along the way. And also want to like preface this with like, there's a lot of luck in this process. And I think like we don't want to believe that to be true, but it 100% is true. Like sometimes like you really truly never know unless you like know someone at working at the company, or you have a friend that works there, or even then you may not know, but you don't know what goes on behind the scenes. Like, you could be the most qualified applicant, but maybe they got like 50 resumes before you and they just like didn't have time to look at yours and they already found like someone that could be an okay fit even if you're a better fit. So sometimes it's really just like the timing of it all. Sometimes it's just like the recruiter scanning and maybe they missed a bullet point that could make you the best candidate. We don't actually know, which is like the most frustrating part of this process. And I have found that like even when I do have an in, even when I do have a connection, it's like never guaranteed. And it just makes you wonder. It's easy for you to look at yourself and be like, what is wrong with me? But then you also have to consider, like, you don't know what the fuck is going on behind the scenes at this company and like how their hiring processes actually are. So, yeah, I mean, I think I personally have ditched cold applying altogether because it doesn't work for me. It hasn't worked for me in the past. I have sent out, hundreds of applications and I've like not only just submitted, hit apply, but I'll like reach out to like an internal HR person or an internal marketing person and been like, hey, like I know we don't know each other, but I'll send them a connection request. And even that doesn't work all the time either. Sometimes it does, other times it doesn't. But I have found that like, and we've talked about this before, but just like putting a lot more energy into building up my own personal brand and my own personal projects, like that is what has gotten noticed more than me hitting the LinkedIn easy apply button.
Yeah. No, 100%. I'm also thinking of like, I feel like I've heard stories from you, Beth, over the last few months and other friends who are navigating like layoffs and everything, where like, even if you do know like the hiring manager for a role, I feel like people are so excited to help you in the beginning and be like, yes, like, let me get you a phone screening or let me like send your resume to this person and then just silence. Like,
Yep.
I see and hear a lot about like that kind of ghosting happening, which I think is just a special form of cruel and unusual punishment. But
Yeah.
it's been rough out there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And like, I think it's easy for, when I'm looking, and I still fall victim to this, and I tell other people not to focus so much on this, but I say that, but I do it too, and I know it's really hard, but like when you're reading job descriptions and you like don't fulfill every single bullet point, which honestly, and most of these job descriptions are written by ChatGPT. So like
Yeah.
they're a bunch of corporate word salad that like don't even fucking make sense. It's like we'll say 7 bullet points about, oh, so you just want someone to be organized. Got it. Like you didn't have to say this many words, but because it's so many words and so much jargon, it can come across as like really intimidating. And in the past, that has hindered me from applying to the role because I'm like, oh, I don't fit every single qualification that they're looking for. But I've had to like reframe my mindset so many times and like recenter myself and be like, okay, instead of focusing on like what you don't have, capitalize on what you do have and what makes you different. And I think the hardest part too about job hunting is like your resume doesn't tell the whole story. And there's so many things like beyond the bullet points I like to say that like really makes you more valuable than what is actually on your resume that you can't really put into words. Like, I like still in my interview processes, like I kind of trip up when I talk about the first half of my career and like all these like random businesses that I built. Like I had like a dating event series that like I scaled and it's really impressive, but like on
Yeah.
paper it kind of sounds like, oh, this like single girly built this like dating series, cool. Like how does that relate to B2B software at all? Which it does. Like it's like I've, built stuff from the ground up. I can build processes, I can build marketing programs, I can build community. These are all things that this company is looking for.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I just like psych myself out because it doesn't fit the jargon that is listed in these job descriptions. And it can be really hard to tell that story and also get noticed by the recruiters if you don't have all that stupid jargon on your resume. So that makes it
Yeah.
really difficult.
Yeah. I mean, even not getting noticed by recruiters, I feel like just getting through the freaking like AI filtering system that everyone is using now. I follow, I guess I could say, I think I would consider us friends. Trish might listen to this and be like, I don't know who you are, but I am connected with Trish Siddell from Teal on LinkedIn. She's amazing, by the way. Go follow her if you don't already. But working at Teal, I think she's like getting some like insider knowledge on the job search. And I saw a post from her. This is like the longest winded way of me saying this ever. But I saw a post from her a couple of weeks ago talking about how like certain even like the format of your resume can like deter you from getting through ATS, even if it's one page and beautiful. Like, I had no idea that even like how you're actually structuring that one page summary of your career outside of the words you're putting on. I didn't know the format had anything to do with that either. And I'm like,
Yeah.
can we win?
Yeah.
Can we get a break?
And sometimes it does matter and other times it doesn't. So you don't know. Like
Yeah.
sometimes those like Canva templates will make you stand out because you'll like add a little pizzazz to it. And that's like sometimes that will work and sometimes that will get you noticed, but other times that will put your resume immediately in the trash. On a complete side note, it's not really a side note because it's related. I just got an email back from a job that I went to a first round. So, yay, go me.
Yay!
Anyways, we can edit that out if you want, but I was
No.
literally as you were talking, I was like, because normally, you get that email where it's like
Yeah.
in response to your application, and you're like, oh, fuck. And then so you open
Yeah.
it, and it's like, you're a great candidate, but unfortunately, you're not good enough for us, and we'll keep your resume on file for future roles. No, this is actually we love that. Anyways, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's what's frustrating, and I really wish there was more transparency around like how companies scan resumes on the job description. I know I've seen sometimes that like our people say like their resumes are looked at by humans all the time, but you just never know. And I wish it was like kind of like the compensation conversation where it's like salary transparency. I wish there was more transparency around how resumes are reviewed because I think that would help candidates a lot in terms of like how they should format their resume, how, should they be focusing on hitting every single key word in the job description. Should that be a thing that they should be investing hours of their time in, or does it matter because it's actually going to be reviewed by a human,
Yeah.
And I think I'm looking at our outline now, and there's like a bullet point that we added that's like the easy apply lie, where we all know there's like the LinkedIn easy apply button, and you just hit a few buttons and apply to a job. Nothing is an easy apply. It
Yeah.
truly is not. And maybe this is like a hot take and bad advice, but I actually like for myself, and maybe this is why I haven't gotten a job yet, but like I refuse to change my resume for every single job that I'm applying to. I personally feel as though I could be investing my time in much more like useful things than doing that. Like I'd rather be reaching out to a bunch of people at an organization that I found on LinkedIn and pitching myself and sending them my resume to get into their like applicant system. I'd rather be working on personal projects and building my own personal brand and creating LinkedIn content that will get noticed by more people than doing that. And I just think it's like and sometimes like you could adjust your resume a million different ways and it still wouldn't be helpful. So you just don't know. And that's what really sucks is you don't know exactly how the process is behind the scenes.
Yeah. No, and even we said this at the beginning of the episode, but even when you know somebody at a company and you're trying to get an in that way, you still don't know what's going on. And I think
Yep.
and at my current company, my brother actually has been trying to work at this company literally since before I started working there. And he's like so qualified for it. I truly like don't believe that anybody would thrive in that environment better than him. And I've reached out to like the recruiting team on his behalf and I'm like, he can't even get a phone screening. Like what is going on? I'm looking at his resume and the application, and even then, all I hear back, even as an internal employee, is that he just doesn't fit the profile. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what does that even mean? Like,
What does
do
that
we
mean?
even know what the profile is?
No. Yeah. And I feel like half the time they don't. And I think that's also just like a standard response that they probably send to everybody. And I think,
Yeah.
I don't want this to be like a bashing recruiters episode either. I think
No.
recruiters are put into a really difficult spot a
Yeah.
lot of the times. And they're usually understaffed. They're usually trying to fill multiple roles at the same time. And this is a tough job market. And so they're getting
Yeah.
hundreds of applications in. So, of course, like, you can't always like I don't also believe that like every single candidate deserves like this super personal treatment from them because it's just not possible. And I think you have to like put yourself in their shoes too and whatever.
Yeah.
But I do think that there is a better way of doing things. And I don't really have all of the answers. I think a good first step is again more transparency in how applicants and candidates are screened and scanned so we know how to set ourselves up for success. But I think beyond that, I know they're also in like a difficult position too. So I want to like be mindful and note that as
Yeah.
well. This is not like fuck recruiters. It's not that
No, we
because
love
it's and it
recruiters.
And it's not the recruiter's fault. It's like it comes from the top down. And I think that's with every single thing that we talk about on this podcast, whether it's about hiring practices, whether it's about marketing stuff, like it's really a top down issue, and it starts, it starts from understaffed and under resourced teams, and that's what, can turn out to be like lower quality output, which sucks
Yeah.
for everybody involved.
I also think, I don't know if this is like the perfect word for it or if I may be getting confused, but I think the decentralization of talent has also played a huge factor
Yep.
into how competitive this job market is now. And I'm just thinking like prior to moving to Kansas City, I was living in a town in rural Colorado, like literally 45 minutes from a grocery store, the middle of nowhere. And I still, I don't know, like I was able to get a job at a company headquartered in Boston because of like work changes with COVID and everything. And I'm just thinking like it used to be even 5 years ago when you were applying for a role, like you were really only competing, like Beth, you would only be competing with people in Chicago. Now you're
Yep.
competing with marketers largely across the United States, which is amazing because it gives people the opportunity to enjoy like a more rural life with a big city job. But it also means like the pool in which you're competing against is just so much broader, which is another reason I feel bad for recruiters and all of this as well, because you just who they're filtering to or filtering
Yeah.
out, I guess, has like gotten even harder. And like, of course, I'm sure especially with you and I, every recruiter we've ever talked to wants to employ us because we're
A lot
amazing.
of
There's just not enough jobs to go around.
not enough jobs to go around. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think like being and like so I guess once you, if you do get past that first round, you get a pre-screen with a recruiter. I feel like, at least my experience, most of the time that goes really well and it's
Yeah.
easy for me. Like that's the obviously one of the easier parts of the interview process. It's hard as fuck to get there, but once you're in that pre-screen, that is like I had like one this morning that went really, really well. So, and it's always like a great conversation. And then the next steps after that is when it just gets continually more and more ridiculous in my experience. And so I'd love to dive into the process beyond the pre-screen. I feel like the only thing that I'll come into like conflict is the wrong word, but the only thing that might defer me or defer them from wanting to move forward is compensation. So that's why I always try to get that conversation out of the way. If it's not listed on the job description, if, on their job description just says like competitive salary, which usually means like they're wanting to underpay, I always ask that question up front. Like, and sometimes the recruiter will ask me for my salary expectations too. So the only time I kind of run into a tiff is if it's like way below what I'm looking for. But other than that, I feel like it's usually like a pretty easy phone call just to make sure that you have all the qualifications. So yeah, I would love to dive in what goes on after that
Yeah. I mean,
because yeah,
I
my
feel
experience has
like
been interesting.
I feel like we have to talk about the email.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
the take home assignment.
Like what Beth is known for in 2025, I think.
So let me like okay, so I've been a part of several interview processes the last 6 months, and or just in general, like the last 5 years of working in corporate for me, there's always been some sort of take home assignment. This has varied from like it takes me 30 minutes to complete to this takes me several days to complete. It always the idea of and none of them have ever been paid. So the idea of a take home assignment for me has always not sat great with me because every single one I've had to do has been basically giving them some sort of like free strategic consulting or like a whole strategy for free. And I think I understand why companies would want to put candidates through some sort of competency test, but I do think that there's a better way about going about it than asking them for free labor that they could then use in their own marketing strategies, creating like net new content. So like that's always not sat right with me, but I've always been in a position where if I like really want the job, I'll do it because it kind of puts candidates in like a shitty spot. Like you either A, you say, fuck you, I'm not doing this for free. I'm not doing it all. And then you just like, you don't get the job because another candidate is going to do it. Not that that's, I'm not blaming anyone else for doing it. I've done it many times. Or B, you do it. And like I said, then you run the risk of not getting the job. You're not getting paid for the work that you just did. And they could use it. And I have seen my content that I've given to them in an interview process months later used on their LinkedIn or like my ideas. And it's so frustrating, and there's no protections against my work unless I were to have them sign an NDA or something like that. But again, these take home assignments are usually given, they usually have like 2 or 3 days to complete them, so you're like not given enough time to do it in the first place. And even if you are unemployed, like I have a whole life outside of this process, right? So like the fact that you're expecting me to just dedicate my days of my time to sitting down and completing a free assignment for you that's going to take me, a day or two to complete, and just like neglect every other thing in my life for a job that I might not even get is insane.
Yeah.
And my first half of my career, I was a full time freelancer. So, like, I, more than most people, understand the value of my time. And so it's never sat right with me. So that was a very long tangent, but clearly I'm very passionate about this topic. But yeah, so I've done it several times, and then during this last 6 months, I've been ghosted by companies after creating like a 30, 60, 90-day marketing plan for them, which took me hours. I've been, again, like just not gotten the jobs. And I've just gotten tired of it. I've gotten so tired of it. Of course, like the more I'm unemployed, the longer or the more desperate I am for a job. But I just can't do the free take home assignments anymore. And I'm fucking tired of it. So there was this one job I was in the running for, and I made it to the final round. And I was given, they were like, oh, and they always frame it as like, oh, here's a quick assessment for you to do. It should take no longer than an hour. And then you look at it and you're like, hold
It's a
on.
whole day of work.
You're asking me to build, this company asked me to build them a full social media strategy with like KPI, like outline my KPIs, give them like content examples of like all this different shit, which would have taken me like actual days. And if this was an assignment given to me for a company that I worked for full time, I would have had a whole month at least to do it. Like, so them asking me to do it in a few days, and I read it and I'm like, I'm just so fucking done. So like I sent a email in response, and this is the first, I was so scared to do it. This is the first time I've ever kind of like stood up for myself and stood up for my work. But I sent them an email basically expressing my concerns, and we can drop like a template, or
Yeah.
we can drop the email template in the show notes
Yeah.
afterwards in case you want to copy and paste what I said. But I basically was like express my concerns around the amount of work and the what word am I looking for?
Specificity.
That,
Whatever.
yeah, that one, of the work that they were requesting. Because also in the previous interview, they had told me the client that I was going to work with if I got the job. And this take home assignment was like the case study was that client. So it was like literally giving them client work that they would have otherwise, I would have charged my hourly fee. They would have had to like hire someone to do that, would have cost them thousands of dollars. They just wanted me to do it. And I was like, listen, I'm not, and I don't know if they would have used it or not. I can't say that. But in my email, I just kind of like expressed those concerns, and then I offered some alternatives. And I was like, listen, like I'm really still really interested in this opportunity. I don't feel comfortable doing this assignment as unpaid. And then I listed like I think like 3 or 4 alternatives of like me getting paid for the work. I think the other one was like a very high level, a more like zoomed out thing of this that I could present and have more of like a conversation about versus me doing it beforehand, which I think is the best way to do it.
Yeah.
And I can't remember what the third option was, but yeah, so I gave them alternatives, and then the recruiter got back to me and was like basically like, "Oh yeah, like this is what wasn't intended to be like a super long assignment. Let me talk to the hiring team and like get back to you." And I was like, okay, sounds good. But and then I'm like, and this is where I think going back to like this is not a bash your recruiter thing. I knew it wasn't his fault. I knew he's a recruiter. How the hell is he supposed to know that asking a candidate to do a full marketing strategy in 3 days is
Crazy.
easy work? Like how does he know how long that's supposed to take, right? And so there's clearly like a disconnect in communication between the hiring team and the recruiter. And unfortunately, the recruiter has to be kind of like the front line in these communications with candidates. And yeah, so I was like, okay, just like let me know. And I had my final round interview already scheduled for the next week. And he was like, just pause on doing the assignment. Like, I'll let you know what they say. And I'm like, okay, sounds good. And then I don't hear back from them
Ever?
after that. Nope.
I actually
So
did not know that.
yeah, that's the update. That's the tea. I did not hear back from them about that. And, maybe the job went to somebody else, maybe, who knows? But I at least hope that that email that I sent to them, like, I hope that opened their eyes a little bit and gave them a little bit of perspective. Maybe it didn't. I think like that's a red flag in itself to even ask a candidate to do that amount of free work.
Yeah.
I hope that, me saying something, at least like something went off in someone's head.
Yeah.
And maybe they're reconsidering their like hiring strategies moving forward, but maybe not. And I don't know what's going to happen. So anyways, that happened. And then I was like, oh, should I talk about this on LinkedIn? So I stir the pot. And I didn't want to call out the company. That was not my intention. I didn't want to send a bunch of pitchforks to it. And I also was like, do I post this on LinkedIn? Is this going to bite me in the ass because I am in the job hunt? Like, our company's going to be scared to hire me because I'm like not afraid to like stick up for myself and, kind of expose people publicly for shitty behavior. Not that I listed the company that I did it to, but like this was just kind of a pattern in general that I'm seeing that I'm not okay with. So I went ahead and posted on LinkedIn. I posted the email. I blacked out, the recruiter's name, the company, all this thing. I didn't give any details. I just kind of like, whatever. It went viral. Like
Obviously.
viral, viral. I think I got like, I don't know, like 8,000 likes. I got reposted on the LinkedIn News official account. It was fucking crazy. And I got hundreds and hundreds of comments. I would say 99% of them were in support and positive. I had a few trolls, but like that's expected. But yeah, I had so many people like sharing their stories with me over DMs and like just saying that's really inspiring because, they've in the position where they want to stick up for themselves, but they didn't feel like they could because they wanted the job and all this stuff. So, all that to say, I think I'm really proud of myself that I did that. I hope that it moved the needle even a little bit. I hope that like recruiters saw that or like companies saw that and like rethought their hiring processes and rethought, how they approach take home assignments. And I also hope it inspired other people to stick up for themselves and stick up for their work because this job market is fucking hard, and I think companies who try to make it even more difficult on candidates, like, just not great. That's my long-winded story about me stirring the pot on LinkedIn and saying fuck you to people who want me to create a full marketing strategy as a take-home assignment to judge my competency. Like, sorry, and this is also in addition to like 5 rounds of interviews. So if
Yeah.
you can't decide if a candidate is strong or a good fit based on 5 rounds of interviews, which in the final round's always a panel, so it's really like 9 interviews, 5 rounds of interviews plus references plus portfolio plus resume,
Yeah.
red flag. Sorry, maybe you need to rethink your hiring processes.
Yeah. No, honestly, yes, huge red flags. And even I think needing that level of take home assignment, because I do agree. I think like I understand wanting the competency assessment, and I think like there's a lot of right answers in how to handle that, and obviously a lot of wrong ones. But I think whenever you're like requesting that much labor for free, like not only is it a red flag of like what is your work life balance going to be like if you land in that role, but also like how competent is the hiring manager that they need to see that level of work to be able to like make a decision on this candidate.
Yep.
Like there's
Hmm.
there's so many red flags for so many reasons. Like it's just
Yeah.
so
And
layered.
like, this was for like an agency. This was a marketing agency job. And it's also like the red flag of just like the hiring manager thinking that 2 or 3 days is enough time to complete a full social media strategy.
Yeah.
Like, if you think that is like the amount of time that you should be giving your employees or even candidates, that like that's enough with like very little context of like I had like a high level idea of what their client was looking for, but
Yeah.
no, so it was just like a lot of questions of competency within the hiring team. And so, at the end of the day, did I have a good chance of getting the job if I did it? Probably. But also, like, to be completely transparent, I wasn't super excited about the role anyways, not outside of that too. Like, the pay was low. I just had like a weird vibe from the beginning. So I think this is like a good example of like trusting your gut too. But I also want to caveat that with I know it's hard to do that when you're in the trenches of unemployment and you're just really searching for any semblance of stability. So sometimes you have to settle for less pay. Sometimes you have to settle for a job that might not be your dream job, but at least it gives you that financial stability that will give you a peace of mind to maybe look for your next big opportunity. So
Yeah.
it's very layered. And I think the fact that it is so layered and the fact that, these companies know that and they're still asking for that level of free work, that's what makes it fucked up to me. So yeah, that's on that.
What do you have you ever gotten a take home assessment that you like vibed with that you felt like was reasonable? And like what was that?
Yeah, so I had a take home assignment um like early on in the job hunt where they wanted me to build or like do a presentation on a project that I had already done before. So it was like presenting like a social media campaign that was successful, and they like really presented it in a way where it was like we don't want any longer than like 5 slides. Like don't make it like a full thing. Um and most of it's just going to be like you presenting it to the hiring team at the end of it. So that I felt was like, yes, did it still take me a few hours? It did. But I was okay with that because I'm like, it's something that I've already done before. So it's like for a different company. So it's not like they can use it in any way, shape, or form to help with like their content. B, it was like, I felt like it was more collaborative in the sense of like I'm talking more about it versus needing to put in a bunch of work beforehand.
Mhm.
And then see, I can reuse that. Like, so I've reused that in my portfolio. Like, it's something that I probably should have had anyways. So I'm really just like kind of pulling from my existing portfolio and creating something new that I can, if I don't get this job, I can continue to use for other jobs and showcasing what I can do. So, and I did that. So that's something that I was okay with. And I feel like that is a good balance of like showing competency of like, if this person has done this before at a different company, they can
Yeah.
do it here. It's like, it's just really a matter of like, because I think the goal of these types of assignments, if you want to give it to a candidate is like, you're really just like showing that they know they have the skills. You don't like so getting
Yeah.
super specific with like how it can help your brand, that's where it becomes problematic. If you're just like doing it just like, hey, does this person know how to be strategic? Does this person know how to, be creative? And how can and the perfect way of doing that is showing your past work. And this is what I've done before, and this is what I can do for your company. So yeah, that's something that I don't. Do you have any examples of ones that you've done in the past?
Yeah, I've had a lot of really shitty ones as well, but I think the best one that I've ever had, and this, I don't know if this is like weird or not, but I basically made my own onboarding plan. And I think it took me like maybe an hour to
Mm-hmm.
do, and it was just like my own 30, 60, 90 plan for what I would do if I got the role. And I like that because I feel like it allowed me to show like my full understanding of like the marketing operation and like that I could kind of understand like how all these teams work together. And it was like really proving something that wasn't something, I mean, I guess they could reuse it if they hired somebody else, but like it wasn't like my creative work. It was just kind of like my
Yeah.
thought process of how I approach new clients and new roles. And I really liked that. I also, my take home assignment for HubSpot was like auditing an old content offer and like explaining what I would do differently. But they also put strict parameters on that where they were like I think I turned in like a 1 page summary of like what I would do to update it. And it wasn't something that was like on the roadmap to be updated. I didn't know that
Yeah.
until after I got hired. But I think I also like, I don't know if this is me just like giving into late stage capitalism, but I also think that my boundaries for what I would or wouldn't do kind of also depends on the company because I maybe understand somebody like HubSpot
Yeah.
having like a stricter process. But I
Yep.
also saying that out loud, I'm like
I know.
I don't know.
I mean, I like same though. Like, as a TikTok sounds like, and you would do it too for a check. Like,
Yeah.
if the pay was like crazy, and it's like a company that I know would like, if I got it, I would like advance my career, and it would be like a really great. You know what? Maybe I would.
Yeah.
Maybe I fucking would. But like, I don't know. I think,
Yeah.
yeah, because I mean, like the company that I asked for, the one that I sent the email to, like, it would not. It would have been like a downward
Yeah.
jump for me, not upward. So like
Yeah.
that was another reason why I feel like more comfortable. But I agree with you. But I think regardless, I still think companies should like, really consider what they're asking and it's like, do I actually need this to,
Yeah.
you know,
Oh my God. Were you the person that was telling me, or maybe I saw it on LinkedIn? I think it later was the company where they brought somebody in
yep.
and instead of like a take home assignment, it was like a paid day of work at the company.
Yes. Yeah, I think that was me. I'm like obsessed with it.
Yeah.
I can't remember who posted it, but yeah, it was someone at Later, the social media software company. Yeah, assessment was I think it was like they paid someone like $500 or something. They paid candidates like decent money to spend 8 hours with their team, and like they joined all of the meetings, they joined all of like the just like creative processes and all the different things. It was like a regular day at work with this candidate, and I thought that was fucking brilliant.
Yeah.
Not only are you paying them for their time, like number one, amazing. Most people aren't doing that, but I think that is the way to show competency, because it's more than just like, do you know how to do all these technical things? It's what's even more important, I would argue, is like how they vibe with your team. And like,
Yes.
I feel like our generation, being millennials, and like we grew up with the internet. We can learn if there's a software listed on the job description that we don't necessarily know, we could learn it in less than a day,
Yeah.
like
Not an
an hour
issue.
probably.
Yeah.
So I feel like putting so much stock in those like technical hard skills is flawed. I think that, having someone come in and work with your team, because you can't teach a lot of those skills. Like you can't teach how to vibe with the rest of your team and how they think, and you can't teach creativity. You can't teach all of these like interpersonal skills that are so important. All these technical skills you can teach easily, like especially in the tech space. Like we know how software works. Like we can fucking figure it out, right? But I thought that was just absolutely brilliant. So if anyone from later is watching this, bravo.
Yeah.
Take a note. Take a note from their book, because I think that was so brilliant.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, and I understand that like maybe for like smaller companies that isn't realistic or whatever, but I do like generally love that direction. I also, this is so random. Do you know that did you ever watch Love is Blind? Okay,
Yeah.
do you
Love Love
remember
is Money.
Kwame and Chelsea?
Of course I
Do you
do.
know that Kwame is the head of influencer marketing at Later?
Wait,
I learned that like recently and that blew my mind. Like I love that.
wait.
Huge fan of that.
I love that.
Weird, like crazy crossover for our life.
Wait, I told you about you know about my random COVID side quest
Yes.
when I did, yeah, like the
Oh my god,
little
yeah.
show
Why am I asking if you've
yeah,
seen Love is Blind?
Dixie's,
Yeah.
yeah. For context, people, I did this like hyper local version of Love is Blind when I was living in DC during quarantine, called DC is Blind, and it like low key went viral, and that was my COVID project. People dated over Zoom without the camera on. So they're in their own little pods, and I had like over 500 applications, and then I had people Venmo me $5 if you wanted to spectate to join a private Facebook group. And I think I scaled, it went from like 0 people to like over 4,000 people in the Facebook group in like 3 days.
That's
So
insane.
that was my little side quest. So
I love
big fan of Love is Blind.
yeah.
Wait,
Sorry, that's so
that is really
random,
fun
but
though.
that's my like
I love that.
fun B2B marketing fact of the day.
Can we also talk about something else that I read a New York Times article on, and it's also in our outline too, are these like ghost jobs that
Yeah.
is becoming more and more common, especially with startups who are trying to get funding. What these companies are doing is they're putting up these jobs that look like any other job, but they're not actually hiring for it. They want to give off the vibe that their company is growing, and they want to seem more attractive to venture capitalist
Investors.
companies or
Wow.
investors or whatever. And some of them are even putting candidates through like multiple rounds of interviews
Shut
just to
up.
say that they are, and then they'll pull the job. And they won't hire anyone. And that's becoming more and more popular because like obviously the economy is sucks, and I'm sure these startups are struggling to get funding like more than other years. So that is a tactic that they're using. And I think it is so fucked up. And that's happened to me. I don't know if it was an actual ghost job, but I do know this happened to me like maybe 3 or 4 times now, where like I've gone through the rounds of interviews and they just like don't hire anyone, and they just like pull the job entirely.
Evil.
Fucking insane.
That is so, oh my God.
Yeah.
I have so many thoughts about that I just don't think I can put on the internet for the risk of my career. But like, who is coming up with these fucking ideas?
That's a great question. I would like to know. I just want to have a conversation with them.
Yeah.
So if you're listening to this and you know of anyone by name, send me a DM. I won't tell them my sources, but I do want to know.
I'm probably going to cut this out, but I have to tell you a story that you just reminded me of. And I can guarantee you that whatever you think I'm going to tell you is not even close. When you're saying like you just want to talk, I think the most like encompassing thing of who I am as a person and just the fact that I have like 5 Pisces placements in my chart is like I growing up, I would listen to the radio a lot. I was homeschooled.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get a lot of pop culture exposure as a child, but I was allowed to listen to 99.9 Kiss Country radio in Hendersonville, North Carolina. And they would do a lot of like news segments. I also could listen to 102.5 with Delilah, if that triggers any memories for anyone. Anyway, so I would listen to a lot of news on the radio very young. And during the time I was growing up was the years following 9/11. And I was just so convinced at the ripe age of like 7 years old that I could cause world peace if I could just sit down with bin Laden and be like, what's going on? Some kids would like practice getting like a Grammy. I would practice these conversations with like really evil men.
What would happen if you just called Taylor up?
Anyway, that's my story. Welcome to the Punchline Marketing Podcast. Here's my trash, my ADHD basket in the background. Cool. Do you keep those? Like, that's just everything I don't want to deal
All over
with.
the place.
Yeah.
Yes, literally, I have like 5 of them. So you
Yeah.
have one. That's impressive. Um, okay, so we spent the bulk of this episode talking about fucked up practices and things that we hate about hiring processes, but I feel like we should spend some time talking about like survival strategies and how we've avoided going down the path of setting the world on fire. In the job hunt process. And I relate to this part on a spiritual level because I've had to do many of these myself to actually just like stay sane.
Yeah.
And if you did watch last week's episode, you know that I'm not doing well, but I am still showering. I am still keeping my place clean. I am still going to the gym. I am still showing up to this podcast. So I'm doing something right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would love to chat about kind of like lessons and perspectives around job hunting and things that have worked for us. We've touched on a few throughout this conversation, but I think we can
Yeah.
spend some time diving into it.
Yeah. I think like going back to 2022, I got laid off twice within 6 months of each other, which I think we've talked about on the show before, and that was like literally the hardest thing I've ever gone through in my life. Even I was fortunate during that time to never face like crazy periods of unemployment. Like I think I was like a month, like 4 to 6 weeks between jobs both times. Um, but I think like so I grew up like I'm a first generation college student, and both of my parents have had like blue collar jobs my whole life. Everybody in their families have like had these blue collar jobs, and I think I was really the first person in my family to ever like get into corporate America. And I think like that became the thing that was like so inherent to who I am as a person and like such a crucial part of my identity. It was like I have this like amazing career. I work really hard and I have this like sexy job title and I make a lot of money even like when I didn't. Like my starting salary out of college was like a lot to my family, right? But I guess what I'm trying to say is like think the most important thing that anybody can do, whether you're in the job search or you're just like trying to like operate as a fucking person in the marketing field or anything adjacent to it, is like this could not be the most interesting thing about you. And it's actually so embarrassing that for so much of my adult life, my job title, the company I worked at was like the cool thing about me. Even like when I started working at HubSpot, I would like introduce myself to people and they would like you would ask, oh, where do you work? And I would get to say, oh, I work at the Sprocket. And for me that was so huge because I wanted to work there since I was in college, and it's like the content marketing Olympics, and like I'm so proud of myself for making it there, and I should be proud of myself for making it there. But oh my god, like there's so much more about me and my life that's so interesting. And I think like obviously this is nuanced, like everything is, because you have to pay your bills. You have to like sustain your life. And like I think especially when you're spending plus 40 hours a week on something, it should be something you're enjoying and that you're proud of. But like, oh my God, there's so much more to you than what you're doing for your paycheck. That's so boring and embarrassing.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I have struggled with that too. I think because the first half of my career was because I was working for myself, like it's really hard to separate personal and professional life. And like I kind of was the selling point to all of the businesses that I was running. I was like the face of them. I was, people wanted to, it's like people want to work with you, not your actual services. Like and I think like that's an important piece to it. But I tied so much of my worth to the success of my businesses. So when I transitioned to corporate work and the first job I got in the corporate world, I was like, I had so much emotional stock in it because I've talked about this so many times, but like I was in a depressive episode, and then getting a full-time job corporate, that was like my saving grace and helped me kind of like rebuild other areas of my life outside of just work, because I had like the financial stability and healthcare and all these different things. So
Yeah.
because of that, I tied so much of my emotional stuff to that job, and I was like trying to like kind of separated a bit because I had been doing it my whole career, and I'm like, fuck, now I'm working for a corporate company and I'm still fucking doing it. And eventually, like through therapy and like a lot of other things, like I was able to kind of like remove myself. And I also think it's especially hard for people in marketing because like for me as a social media manager, like I'm literally the face of almost every brand that I've worked with and worked for, because a lot of times like social media manager now also means content creator.
Yeah.
So you're the one on the TikTok page, you're the one all over the LinkedIn page, you're kind of, and also even if you're not on camera, you're writing all the content, you have like an emotional tie to that because it's the really hard work that you put into it, and now it's being judged by a bunch of people who are on the outside of it. So I think it took me a long time to kind of like separate myself from that. And I think if you don't have enough of a personality or enough of a kind of, what's the word I'm looking for, like a purpose outside of your work, then if you do suddenly lose your job, if you do, suddenly want to transition, it's going to be hard. It's going to be way harder to do it if your entire emotional being is tied to your work. And I agree with what Drew said, is that there's a million other things that are more interesting about you than the capitalism job that you have. And I promise you that. I promise you that when I talk to people, all my friends, my family, the last thing that we want to talk about is work. Like, I want to hear about everything else in their life usually. And if they want to vent about work, I'm happy to listen. But like, I don't tie their worth to how much money they make or what their job is. Like it's just like not a thing that
Yeah.
I do. And if you do that, then you're weird.
Yeah.
So,
I agree.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
No, I think it's like, and I don't know if this is just like the background that you and I have come up in where we're working in SaaS, or like we've both worked in kind of like agency environments before. And like, I just feel like there's such an ego problem. And I know we've talked about that before, but like, I think it's really hard. It's very easy to fall into this trap of like making your marketing career the coolest thing about you when you're spending, again, plus 40 hours a week under leadership that is
mhm.
insisting that this is like the most interesting thing. And like,
Yep.
I've worked under leadership where like they have families and lives allegedly, but I also see them working from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. And I'm like, do you hang out with your kid? Like, you have children. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
um, and I will say that that is like male management that I've worked under that I've seen doing that more than, I mean,
Of course.
my director right now is a mom, and like she's amazing, and like she works really hard, and she also like is a great mom. So I don't know. I just think like I'm hoping that as the like generational dynamics within workplaces continue to change and we have more like younger people managers stepping in, I'm really hoping that the general culture of how we view our work will change. But I also think that that's a really hard thing to ask for when our managers were managed by people who have this like toxic mindset. I think that there is a responsibility if you're like stepping into that kind of leadership role, like you do have a responsibility to almost like
Mhm.
break that cycle in a lot of ways.
Yep. And I wish that more. I used to work with this woman, and I had so much like respect for her because she got offered a promotion to be a people manager. And she was like, I mean, I would love to get promoted, but if there's she's like, I also don't want to be a people manager. I would rather stay where I'm at. I don't feel like I'm professionally ready to do that. I don't know if I ever want to do that. Like, I'm really happy with where I'm at right now. And if there's a different path to promotion that doesn't involve people managing, I would love to explore that. But the fact that she was able to be so for real with herself and been like, you know what, I actually have no interest in managing people. And it was like, I was talking to her about it, and she was like, it has nothing to do with the fact that I don't think I'd be good at it, because I would be, but I just don't want to. And I'm like, honestly, that's like so valid. I wish more people would do that. The people who are like more self-aware and just been like, you know what? I don't think I'd be a good people manager, or I'm not ready to be a people manager, because that's a whole other job in itself, and it's so important. You have such a impact on the people that you're managing, and they're usually people who are earlier in their careers, and it can leave such an like having a bad manager can leave such a lasting impact on you and your self-worth as an individual. And I've been so lucky with my managers in the past, where I've always had women in charge who are my direct reports, and they've all been so wonderful, and like not everyone can say that, and I'm really lucky that I haven't had toxic leadership, like at least with my direct reports. But I think it takes a lot of courage to admit that like, I don't want to be people manager. And I'm
Yeah.
like, you know what, that's so real.
No. That I wish that more people would have that level of self-awareness. Not news to Beth or anyone who's listened to the show before. I've had really like one manager who just, I still quite literally am in therapy for what she did to my
Yeah.
psyche and self-worth in a matter of
Yeah.
6 months. But I wish that more people would like be able to admit that maybe that isn't their calling, or
Mhm.
just not something that they think they want to do or be good at, because it is a skill that has to be developed. And I don't think like it develops just because you have 10 years of experience or anything. Like, you have to really have the personality for it. Also, like,
Mhm.
literally the weirdest thing ever about my career lore. I don't know if you know this, Beth. I operated as a people manager in my very first role out of college.
I didn't know that.
I was working at this agency, and I got hired in March of 2019, no, January 2019, as an executive assistant. And I did that part time until I graduated in May. And then my job title was communications director for a little while until our copywriter left. And then I stepped into like more of like a content strategy role. It was so weird, but I basically like literally made these like big girl business decisions for this agency. And it was just me and Mike, the guy who owned it. He's not listening to this, but wish he was. I love him. And we would just like make these decisions about the agency, and I helped hire people, I helped fire people, and I was 22 and just the biggest little dummy in the world doing this stuff. And I would love one day to like get back to a point of being a people manager. Right
Yeah.
now I'm just a girl with a keyboard and I can barely manage myself. So I have no business doing that for anyone else.
Speaking of, I guess, vulnerability and being real with ourselves around, can we even take care of other people when we're taking care of ourselves, brings me to another point I want to talk about for like strategies that work.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it involves LinkedIn and being vulnerable. And I hate those two things put in the same sentence, but truly, that has been by far the biggest thing that has worked for me in this job hunt process. I'm cringing saying that, but it's so fucking true. And I'm not talking about the performative vulnerability where it's like just some bullshit corporate broetry shit of like made up stories, which has infiltrated the LinkedIn platform. I am talking about just like being so fucking for real and being honest with where you're at, whether, you're unemployed and you're searching for work, or just like whatever. And it's a tough line to oops, sorry. It's a tough line to like kind of toe, because like we were just talking about with my viral post around the job, like that could have gone a completely different way. That could have really bitten me in the ass. And I mean, I knew it probably wouldn't have, but like, you just don't know how it's going to be received by people. And again, that could have really hurt me in the job hunt process. And honestly, maybe it has. Like, maybe recruiters looked at that, and even if they didn't comment or say anything, like maybe that did have an impact. But I would say the positive outweighed the negative 110%. And and I don't want to say this with the idea that I only put vulnerable stuff out there just to get people to engage with
Of
it, because
course
that's not
not.
my intent.
Yeah.
But that's always made me feel better in terms of like telling my story and just like getting like being real with people on the internet about like where I'm at and what I'm going through because I feel like it's a way to connect with people and I love connecting with people. So that's like my sole purpose in doing it. But every time I am honest and vulnerable about where I'm at, like that is what's gotten me several messages in my DMs, people wanting to work with me on either a freelance basis or talk to me about contract work or even full-time jobs. And it doesn't have to be like posts that are like sad and sappy and whatever. It can be like other things that are vulnerable about me. And maybe it's a more positive thing. But that has by far been like if I were to say it was a tactic, I guess it is a tactic. I don't know. But that's what's like, I guess it's like an accidental tactic, but it's been working for me.
Yeah.
And I think people just appreciate, I think in this like world of just social media fakeness and performativeness, like people appreciate being real. And because we spend so much of our time online, people can read through the bullshit. And I think as long as you're like staying true to yourself and true to what your story is, and you're able to kind of like put that out there, that shows a level of like bravery and resilience that not a lot of people possess. And I think it's pretty cool, like be able to put yourself out there like that. And I know like the community as a whole like appreciates seeing content like that. So that has been what I've like been focusing on a lot. It's just like not only just sharing my story on LinkedIn, but also on this podcast. And that's kind of what has gotten me the strongest connections because it's just people are looking at me as a human that they want to get to know
Yeah.
versus just like a candidate that they want to check off some box about, right? So yeah, and I know Drew, you also feel like the same way. Your content has been crushing it as well.
Yeah, whenever I get the courage to open that hellscape of an app, it usually does pretty well. And I've made some really good friends, good internet friends
Yep.
through doing this. I also will say I was asked recently, like, why we decided to start the podcast. And it was a question, like, in the context, like, it really kind of like threw me off. But I guess my honest answer to that question is what came out of my mouth since I didn't have time to prepare for it. But like, this is for a point, I promise. But I think, like, to speak for Beth, there have been so many times throughout our careers where we have been or felt like we were the only person in the room who didn't understand the jargon, or we weren't talking about marketing strategies the same way that everybody else did, or like our career experiences didn't line up with everybody else's. And like, I can remember like working in a company where everybody went to like this amazing brand name school and like they had a life that looked like this one kind of way. And I definitely didn't. And like, I think like this podcast exists because Beth and I needed to not feel so fucking alone in this industry. And like, boy, that has worked tenfold. I think we have all of 50 subscribers for this show. Love each and every one of you. But like, it's not like what we're doing is like crushing recording numbers or downloads or anything like that. But like, just the process of getting together once a week and talking about things that are so relevant and honest and doing it in a way that's very authentic to who we are and what our experiences have been. Like, it's just made me 10 times more confident in who I am, both as a person and in my career. And like Beth said at the beginning of the episode, like the feedback that we get has been so nice. And it's just like made me feel like so much less alone during a year that has just been very challenging in a lot of ways. And like, I love doing this.
I do
Yeah.
too. Yeah, no, and I echo that 1,000%. I think it has also given me, there's been, like you just said, so many times in my career where I feel like I'm like saying the wrong thing or I'm sounding stupid or I'm like but now it's like years later, I'm seeing these narratives on LinkedIn about shit that I have been fucking shouting, trying to shout from the rooftops about B2B marketing 5 years ago. Like, and I'm like, oh, people are finally getting it. And now I feel validated. But I've been saying this for 5 years. I just wish I had somebody else in the room with me to also vouch for it too. And it's hard when you feel because then when you're saying it and you're like, okay, am I sounding crazy? Am I like stupid? So I agree. I think like that has been a huge value add to this podcast, and it's made me again also similar to what Drew just said, like very confident. It's helped me in interviews. It helps me just like narrate my story a bit more and just feel more comfortable with what I'm saying and how I'm saying it because I get on this podcast every week and I'm joined by Drew, who validates everything that I'm saying. I'm joined by amazing guests who also validate what everybody is saying. And it's just such a nice
Yeah.
feeling. And I think like, we're not saying like to get a job you have to start a podcast, but like I think finding something that brings your like validates you, whether that's writing, whether that's like, I don't know, joining some sort of community or whatever that just makes you feel like you're valid in who you are. That is so fucking important because that is half the battle in navigating this unemployment and job hunt bullshit is like understanding and continuing to own who you are and not getting too far from that core of who you are as a person. Because that's what I've really struggled with is like, I feel like I'm putting on this performance of like, oh, I'm fine, everything's cool, it's chill, when I'm actually not fine. So I've been building all these fake narratives around myself, and that space is getting bigger. And then I struggle with like, now I'm feeling a lot smaller. But every time I record something like this or I write my Substack, I get closer to that person that I know that I am, and it's so helpful. So like I talked about this in last week's episode, but like find something that brings you that sort of feeling or energy because it is so fucking important and it's going to help you just like stay grounded in this process and like sound more confident, be able to like, I don't know, just recruiters can read the energy. And
Yeah.
if you're coming with like your authentic energy, like that's what's going to be super helpful
Yeah.
in my
No,
opinion.
I think that's the best piece of advice I could give anyone who's in the job hunt is like, you just have to show up 100% yourself. Because also, like, you don't want to work somewhere where you can't be 100% yourself. So
Yep.
even if that means like a longer process of finding that good fit, I promise it'll be worth it in the long run. Like, and I know, again, that's hard whenever you have things like you need health insurance, you need a paycheck. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I understand that there is nuance there, but like, I think you're just going to do yourself so many favors by just being yourself and being confident in yourself throughout that process.
Yep.
Like it's just the best thing you can do. And actually, like I have told people this before, but whenever I do interview, even before the show started, like I literally would just pretend that the interview was a podcast. Like I would like just try to take
Yep.
all the pressure of like the end result of the interview process off and just show up on those calls or in those meetings. Like it literally is just getting coffee with somebody in the space and talking about what you know and what you're an expert in. And I think,
Yep.
at least for my little anxious self, that kind of framing really helped a lot.
100%. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, another great episode per usual. Not to toot our own horns, but like
We didn't,
crushed it.
we didn't, I'm going to expose us here. We didn't have a lot of prep for this episode. We literally decided to talk about this when we got on the call. So,
And just being so like Drew and I have both been fucking going through it the last couple weeks. She's been busy with life shit. I've just been in my own head about this exact topic. So,
yeah.
but I do appreciate that we're able to just come on and wing it
Yeah.
and still have a great conversation and another great therapy session
Yes.
for me at least. So,
Yeah. Always so good, Beth.
yeah,
Thank you.
so good.
Thank you, everyone who listened. If you made it all the way through, we really appreciate you. As always, new episode next Wednesday. So follow our Substack. Follow our AI newsletter. We have taken a break on the email marketing for a minute while we kind of recalibrate our goals there. But they will be coming soon. Please like this episode on whatever platform you streamed it. Please follow us on whatever platform you streamed it. And you know what? Your mom texted me and she said she really wants you to start sending her these links. So if you could do that too, it'll make everybody happy. We appreciate you so much. Thank you.
Yep. We love you. And yeah, we will see you next
Next
Wednesday.
Wednesday. Bye, guys.